Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing.
From the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Welcome, everybody. Free Energy Friday. It's your host, Ashton Forbes. Today, we're talking about free energy, guys. And just like with the other two series, probably going to cut off this particular series, season 1, after this one. Reason being, I feel like we've uncovered a lot. We've uncovered a lot in this first season 1, the last 12 plus weeks of Free Energy Fridays, Secret Science Wednesdays, and Science and Technology Saturday. So I wanted to recap some of what we've already discovered with you guys today. And before we get into all that, we're going to riff a little bit. So first of all, Scarlett Johansson clone in the chat. Scarlett Johansson clone in the chat. I love it. Also, my boy 0 Point Energy Disclosure. I saw the clip that you made of the last one. Pretty good. Also, I'm just burnt out, guys. Just a heads up. I've been burnt out. I'm trying to do too many things at the same time. Trying to stream, trying to do my normal job 9 to 5, trying to do other free energy stuff and other projects on the side as well. It's a lot, guys. So I don't know. We're going to figure out what to do next. Doesn't mean we're going to stop. Just going to figure out the next path. I imagine that the Hodge Twins podcast will probably drop next Friday. I'd imagine. It's going to be a good one, I think. Check out the podcast that I did with the Dougs, the Curious something or other podcast, and the one that I did, the other one that I did, I forget. But I'm also going to be on Matt Beal. Let's go with Beal. In a couple weeks as well. So Bob Grenier was just on with him. Check that out if you're interested. So let's start with, I was watching Leonard Susskind on Kurt Germangle, whatever. And I'm starting to get a feel for everything that's going on now. A lot of these physicists know each other. Who is it that Kurt said that he knew? Oh, he's friends with Gary Nolan for sure as well. So you start to see why the gatekeeping is so prevalent, is that really when you narrow it down, all the podcasters, all the academics, they all kind of know each other. Listening to Leonard Susskind was really illuminating. He's basically saying, we haven't got it all figured out. And he says, I push my students to try to go against the grain and try new ideas out. And they say, you know what? I'm scared. I want to get a new job. I don't want this to impact my career that I'm trying to obtain in physics. And you realize, holy crap, the academic machine and institutions are just as corrupt as everybody says. They've been corrupted by greed, money, just incentives that are perverse. And I just sat there listening to Susskind and Kurt talk, and it just, God, science is boring as hell, chat. It's boring as hell. And you listen to a lot of these guys, and we're talking about making tiny incremental increases in physics over 50 years. It's like, what? And you just sit there. I just want to yell. Like, the answer that you're looking for in this quantum gravity is 0 point energy. That's what you're looking for. It's been out there the whole time. You know, we don't need 15 dimensions. I don't know, but we can just, it observationally explains everything we see. I thought I took a couple notes I wanted to mention on it. One sec. Yeah, okay. Just a couple. A lot of what they mentioned too is whether or not there's a boundary to space. Who cares? Who cares if there's a boundary to space? Right? Well, I'm just like, oh, is it either de Sitter space or non-de Sitter space? Is there a boundary, or is it like the horizon where there's not a boundary? I don't know, guys. Who gives a fuck? We don't even know if there's a Big Bang or not. We think there was. We don't know how old the universe is. We can't explain gravity. Let's just start with the basics. Then we can worry about how huge, massive the universe is. Like, let's figure out why we can't explain gravity, why we can't understand where gravity comes from, whether or not it's a force or not, it's not. You know, and so I was listening to a lot of this, and truthfully, God, my live streams are more entertaining than a lot of these science interviews. So if you think, and this is a great point here, engineers greater than physicists, couldn't be more true. And it's not a matter of I have no bias in this. It's just the engineers know what they see. Physicists are stuck here thinking about theory and trying to add on to theory, as opposed to like, let's just observationally try to explain the experiments. Casimir effect, Lamb shift, Aronoff-Bohm effect. The reason why these effects get brought up time and time again is that they show that we have experimental evidence of 0 point energy. The thing we call 0 point energy, the radiant energy, the ether, whatever it is out there. We have the experimental evidence for it, but the physicists are trying to build a theory for it. Meanwhile, we're building floating orbs that can just fly around and zap things out of the sky. Right? Like, physicists sitting here arguing over whose theory is more perfect. Meanwhile, we got this shit going on. Meanwhile, we got civilian airliners getting zapped out of the sky by 3 orbs. I think we're well past the point about arguing over which theory is most correct. I think we're at the point where it's like, okay, let's just, these people were mostly correct. The 0 point energy people were right. Quantum mechanics wins in the end of the day. I think we're to that point. Oh, but this brought up another one, the hologram. So I didn't realize that the holographic principle comes from this idea of string theory. So I don't think it's dependent upon string theory at all. The holographic principle pretty much just says all the information about our universe can exist on the boundary of space. Now, maybe this is why we need to know if there's a boundary to space or not. I think it's pretty damn clear at this point that if you can teleport a plane, the holographic principle is true. And what we see around us is a projection. But the information is not stored around us. The information is stored on an extra dimension or a different dimension, just like a holographic plate can produce a 3D hologram from a 2-dimensional image. Same thing in our reality. Now, you may say, Ashton, why are you harping on all of this so much? Also, thank you for objectifying me. Appreciate that. No cap. I needed that pickup today, chat. The reason why I'm talking about this is because this is the baseline for understanding how free energy is possible. It doesn't matter what your mechanism is, what your device is you need to understand that we are in a sea of energy, just like the fish is in the fishbowl. And then once we see that, then we can begin to understand what free energy really means. Now, the first thing that we've learned is that free energy, and kissy emoji back to you too, Ellen, Coco. Free energy does not mean that it's going to be immediately free, as in no cost. This is what I hate the most. People are like, if you're right, then give me free energy, give me energy free, give me free stuff. Give me free stuff. Early on, we learned that free energy is not about give me free stuff. Free energy is that we have an unlimited supply of energy, better than solar, better than wind, that's natural, that's unlimited, and the rate is almost probably nearly unlimited as well in terms of how much we can pull out at once. We can tap directly into the source of the energy that we produce all around us. That's the real secret. And if you're interested in the UFO phenomenon, I'm not particularly interested in aliens. Spoiler alert, aliens probably exist. Who cares? Get over it. Aliens existing is like a 1990s thing. Okay, great. Aliens might exist. We've been to Mars. We've seen that Pluto is geologically active. We've got seasonal methane on Mars, methane. We know for sure there's life out there. There's life out there, and it's probably abundant. And if it's abundant, that means there's intelligent life out there. Great. Okay, so now we can get past the alien thing. End of the day, the secret to the floaty UFO is the energy source. Whatever controls this craft has figured out how to harness energy from all around it, day or night, no matter the conditions. That's 0 point energy, folks. 0 point energy. And if we know that its fundamental core is electromagnetic and connected, or electrogravitic, however you want to think about it, electromagnetism is connected to gravity, then we say the answer is pretty simple. The answer must lie in electrical engineering. Electrical engineering. My personal belief is that we've gotten to the point technologically now where our material science is to the level when this is a cell phone, look how thin this thing is, right? iPhone, this is like a 13. We're on probably like iPhone 16. We've gotten to the point now where we can harness that. We can make chips that are so small that we can actually harness the 0 point energy relatively efficiently at this point. Thomas Townsend Brown, yes. The other beauty of this is that all it took to discover this was to take a look at history. Look at all the history of the UFO phenomenon, anti-gravity phenomenon, cold fusion phenomenon. They're all linked together. And just believe the claims that people were making. Just take it all in as evidence. Take everything and assume that everybody's telling the truth. Take all the information in and sort it out and go, where's my commonalities? If anyone out there does this, you're going to come to the exact same conclusion. One of the biggest problems that people have is they assume everything out there is disinformation. Everybody's lying out there. When the true reality is closer to the opposite. Most people are out there telling the truth. There's a few people that are lying that are muddying the waters. And a lot of times people are lying by omission. They're not even really directly lying to you. But if you assume most people are telling the truth, you are going to find out that we've understood gravity for decades. We've had gravity figured out. It just never has gone mainstream. We call it suppression. You're going to find out that many people have figured out free energy and over unity. A lot of it has been ridicule that's held us back, and lack of scientific understanding, lack of understanding of quantum mechanics, and lack of respect for quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics tells us how the world really works. What we see on the big level is great, but what we see on the small level is the inner workings of our construct. Now, I'm going to start today. I want to look at, oh boy, where did I save it? Okay, Stefan Marinov's device, the MAG something or other. Magnetic vortex hyperionization device. Oh man, I've got too many windows open. This is going to get sus, chat. So the first thing I want to do, we're greedy assholes. We're also a violent species. We're a violent species. I don't think that we should be afraid of other species. If the other species have this technology, wanted to wipe us out, they wipe us out instantly. They could just destroy our planet, no problem. It's us. It's us that we need to be afraid of. That's the stupid part. We just need to be afraid of ourselves. And I think that we are afraid of ourselves, and that's why we won't tell people the truth about how easy this technology is. So let's start actually with my boy Tom Bearden again.
The generator powered the the external circuit. It doesn't. It does not power it at all. All it does is we twist the crank on the generator, the shaft, to turn the shaft, and that forms a magnetic field inside the generator, and that energy in that magnetic field dissipates itself upon the internal charges to force the positive charges in one direction and negative charges in the other and make that dipole, and that's all the generator does. It doesn't add 1 watt to the power line. All the coal, all the oil, all the dams ever built, all the nuclear fuel rods ever consumed, never added 1 single watt to the power line. All they did was keep rebuilding the dipole that we have designed the silly circuit to destroy faster than we can power the loads.
There you go. So right off the bat, biggest question we need to ask ourselves, whether or not you've been following along or you're new, where does energy come from? If you believe that the energy is being converted from whatever source in the power plant to electrical energy and then transmit at the speed of light through the wires, you need to probably take a look at the Veritasium video that explains that electricity actually doesn't really flow through wires. Actually, it flows through the fields that the electrons in the wires are creating. And that is a very significant difference. And it immediately starts just to wonder, what is lightning really doing as well? What are the northern lights doing? Where's the energy coming from all these things? And if you wonder that, then the next question you ask is, well, what was Tesla onto? What did Tesla figure out? Tesla figured out alternating current, that if you spin a copper coil through a magnetic field, it produces current. Is it my hand? Am I converting hand energy into electrical energy? We would argue that we are converting it by the fact that I need to do some work in order to cause the electrical energy to occur. But what's the rate that I'm getting at that? The rate is variable. It depends on the device that I'm spinning, how hard I'm spinning it. So if there are other ways to pull it off, yeah, I think we'll talk about John Cyril as well. Although I don't really have a lot of videos for them to watch. Oh, I have some stuff. Okay, so let's take a look. If there are ways that we can pull it off, that we can create energy, produce it, why do we think that we are limited? Why do we feel like we are limited to just spinning a copper coil through a magnetic field? Why don't we try other approaches? Do you think that Tesla, if he were around today, do you think he would be still bothering about spinning copper coils through magnetic fields? No. Tesla was over 100 years ago. Tesla he wanted to figure out how to connect to energy, how to connect to it in efficient ways. And he was working with the stuff where we were still riding around on horses, and Tesla's out here pulling energy out of the atmosphere, pulling energy out of 0-point fields. So this hyperonization device, this is some kind of notes around it. I think it's interesting. Production of extremely high voltages, the rotating magnetic field spins the compass needle. Unconventional, there's Doppler effects, time dilation effects related to this device. Time is compressed of EM radiation, resultant decrease in perceived inertia and mass, result greater perceived acceleration with less force, measured from the inside. Speed compression, shielding effect on the inside by oblate spheroids of ionized particles. So right away, when we talk and look at free energy devices, we find they produce energy out of seemingly nowhere, but we know it's not coming from nowhere. We know it's coming from the ether, from the Dirac sea. They also have a mass and inertia reduction effect, almost always, and we see a cooling effect. If we see all these effects right away, we're very interested. Why? Because we know that free energy is using the source of 0-point energy. And if you're pulling energy out of a region, you're cooling down that region by default. Heat is energy. Let's see. Let's start with the classical electromagnetic point of view. Imagine a permanent magnet with a north pole out of your computer monitor. Its flux lines can be imagined as a large number of X's on your screen. An electron moves in the plane of the monitor from left to right. As the electron cuts through the lines of the magnetic flux, Lorentz force reflects it downward. the electron actually spirals clockwise in the plane of a computer motion with radius r. Why is this important? Because another big aspect to free energy is this vortex motion. This vortex motion is just a matter of what happens when we exist in a three-dimensional space-time, or four-dimensional space-time, three-dimensional space. And these electromagnetic fields are what drives the direction of travel. Okay. What did I want? Actually, I think I wanted to go down here. So this is the ring formation. What I thought was really interesting about this is it's all about manipulating magnetism. Always. I think what you're going to find is a lot of the systems are similar. So a big question too is like, who gets credit? A lot of the people that deserve the credit for a lot of this science are already dead. That's the sad reality of it. As I pointed out on Wednesday's stream, this looks very similar to Salvatore Pais' magnetically confined fusion reaction as well. Is that people have just figured out magnetism is the key. What I really wanted to read were these messages down here at the bottom. These are some kind of, what did it say at the beginning? Tries to claim what these messages are somewhere here. Here they are. 3 messages. Groom Lake kernel reveals all. UFO excitation ESP. Excitation field vectors. Somebody visited Marinov in 1997. So also, this stuff is decades old. We're talking 20, 30 years old, etc. Have I ever talked to Ken Wheeler? No. I sent him a message one time like a year ago about teleportation. Ken Wheeler's, I think, pretty smart guy, but man, really hard to get on board with him when you can't really understand what he's saying a lot of the time. I mean, he's for people that like already understand electrical engineering, not for people that are like new. Okay. But yeah, I think he understands magnetism very well. Okay, I tell how excitation and accelerated time, less inertia, gravity, and mass are one and the same thing. Yeah, that's true. So why are these things the same? Yeah, the supercell stuff by Ken Wheeler is pretty neat, guys. I'm going to get back to the target here, though. Why are all these things the same thing? Because they're all based on 0-point energy. The rate of time is going to be dependent on how much 0-point energy. Same with inertia. If you remove the 0-point energy, there's less inertia, then there's therefore less gravity and therefore less mass. These are all the same concepts. Space-time is connected. Time is connected to mass. Mass is energy. Okay? So mass is energy equals mc squared. Time is related to gravity and to time dilation. So that connects all of those, and then less inertia. Ships may travel hundreds of times faster than the speed of light without time dilation. And energy needed for this is very little. Communications are also faster than light. This is an interesting claim. Can we really have no time dilation effect? Huh. That's really interesting. If we travel faster than the speed of light, this claim here that there's no time dilation, that's a wild one to me. That's a wild one. That might mean that there's some kind of universal clock. Not sure about that. EEG waves from 1 to 60 cycles are telepathy. I don't know what the hell that means. But they come from fast time, so they're compressed in time or bandwidth. Ordinary radios are not quick enough to detect the information. Now, this is interesting because this is kind of the idea of pilot wave theory and consciousness. Like we're looking a little bit ahead and we're looking a little bit behind in time. It's pretty interesting. Man left himself dreams of a paradise where technology and nature are in perfect harmony, where he's immortal and free of disease, needs, and wants. And this can be done directly from a mind product this very day using light lines. As somebody who's worked on the B-2 bombers, more advanced cousins in the Air Force for 20 years, I can tell you the whole story is unbelievable. 20 hours is too conservative a time estimate for a complete explanation. Some crafts we do use electromagnetism to nullify gravity and even extract hidden information from EEG waves. But these are not deployed and will not be until they are needed. Did you just hear that? Why is it talking about EEGs, electroencephalogram, or brain waves? Oh yeah, yeah. EEG is a cardiology test. Weird. This part where it said they will not be deployed until they are needed. Doesn't that ring very similar to the MH370 videos? The way that they've been able to keep this secret is that they don't break it out, except for in situations where they're sure nobody's going to see it, or in situations where they have plausible deniability. They pump electricity from inside themselves into a sheet of electricity some distance away, exactly as the Earth is positive ground and the ionosphere is a negative sheet. This sheet bends parallel radar waves around the craft like a water droplet in a rainbow, or just like the ionosphere bends radio waves, making for long distance communications. This is a relatively simple and straightforward effect. And it is what Einstein was attempting in Project Rainbow or the Philadelphia experiment. I actually agree. I think that this is where, if you look at it, we've realized, okay, obviously it's based on 0-point energy. So if we make a super Faraday cage that can block out the 0-point energy, well, actually we're bending space-time. Now, this is where there is a connection between cloaking and teleportation. And the answer is teleportation is just a form of advanced cloaking. Teleportation is you've cloaked the 0-point fluctuations, which is you've cloaked your projection of your reality. If you cloak your projection of your reality, you're teleporting. You're teleporting from one location to the next. The Germans were engaged in the same effort 50 years ago, but the electric vacuum, the vortex field, also causes excitation of the atoms in it, which shifts the waves in frequency and accelerated time. So what they're also saying here as well, as you can tell right away, they're talking about 0-point energy, right? The electric vacuum, vortex fields. What we're finding is that vortexes are interacting with the 0-point energy all the time, possibly. An atom at rest is just stuck in equilibrium on the top of the ocean of energy, just right on the top. Losing energy to the top and gaining energy from the bottom, right? The energy is being radiated out into our universe, and energy is coming from the 0-point energy, the ether, all around us, all the time. All the time. This also explains how a magnet is able to stick to the fridge. How is a permanent magnet sticking to the fridge? It's perpetually pulling energy out of the environment, and energy is being released in our world as a force that's connecting it to the fridge, defying the law of gravity. It's not really defying gravity, it's just doing what magnets do. Okay. This part just gets really wild, chat. Why are we reading this? Well, here you go. The Air Force feels it has nothing to worry about because nobody will believe these things. And even though they require no special admission but are based entirely on relativity and simple electromagnetic laws. First, I tell how electrons are controlled in electromagnetic fields using physics and Maxwell's equations. Then, two systems are given for establishing a permanent excitation in the volume. The practical system uses a magnetic vortex and weak static field. Next, temporal effects are described by contrasting how people in gravity and then excitation fields perceive quanta. Then, faster light travel and communications are discussed, as well as how EEG waves are telepathy. But information is compressed in time or bandwidth. By the end, you will see there's much more at stake than the government keeping the secret than gravity alone. And right away now, when we are listening to this, why do I find this to have credibility? Because it's the same exact thing that I figured out, and this predates my investigation of this, is that you find out, holy shit, all this stuff is connected. Nobody's going to believe it because it's just straight up magic. And then you believe, then you realize this is going to lead us to free energy. This is going to lead us to free energy. This permanent excitation here sounds like keeping the dipole open. I could be wrong, but that's probably what's going on here. Everybody who starts to see behind the curtain, they realize, oh shit, faster than light travel means free energy. It means free energy. No matter how you look at it, faster than light travel, the amount of energy classical view looks at it is an infinite amount. So either there's an infinite amount available and the classic view is correct, or there's not an infinite amount and the classic view is incorrect and there's another perspective of it, negative energy. Okay, so then they talk about some fields. So we want to set up this electric sheet. So what it sounds like we're doing here, this is actually really interesting, guys. This might be the secret. The question that everybody asks, guys, okay, let's go full screen chat. Everybody asks me, hey, if this is real, build it. Explain to me how to build it. These answers are explaining you how to build it right here. The big thing that we've been trying to figure out, how do I produce the Casimir effect without the metal plates? Well, why do I need metal plates at all? What are the metal plates actually even doing? What if I can build an electric sheet to spec? Any shape I want. Like I can just pull up paint and I can decide. And yes, I'm pulling up paint. I'm pulling paint up. It's happening, chat. And you say, okay, well, there's this line experiment I've got. And if I put these lines together really close, there's this effect between them. Well, what I want is I want a circle. I want a circle is what I want. Well, what if the answer to producing this is that we figure out how to make a squiggly line? And I'm going to have to figure out how to make a squiggly line. Well, a squiggly line like this, right? And now I can just cut out any shape I want, right? Any shape I want, I can cut it out. That's the answer. That's what we want to be able to do. Well, this document is giving us that answer. It's saying using the electromagnetic forces, the Lorentz force, using Maxwell's equations and general relativity, we can figure this out. Static electrons can be accelerated by magnetic fields. Basically, they're saying use the magnetic fields to pull it off. Makes sense. Sending current AC through cause periodic reversals in the electrons. That's what alternating current is all about. Two ways to produce the sheet. Both require pumping electrons from inside the ship into a sheet of electricity. The first does this from a central magnetic pole. A strong static magnetic field is set up, and PDC, whatever that stands for, is sent oppositely through the pole to set up circular electric lines about it. Electrons are accelerated circularly about the pole, and as soon as they move, they experience an outward centrifugal deflection. Each electron which leaves the center of the ship creates a positive hole. And so there is an internal electrical centrifugal field. So this is the force, the field of electrical field right here. This is actually just F equals constant times both charges divided by distance squared, where N is the number of electrons removed to the sheet. Each electron has potential energy that, and the ship has the same potential energy, so it is excited because the excitation is the only way matter absorbs energy without heating. This actually sounds very similar to how this is like pretty much how the plane's being teleported. That's what you're seeing here as well. This is why it all comes back to electricity. And it's sad that humanity hasn't figured it out before now. When we look at this is explaining that they're producing an electrical sheet. So they're producing the Casimir effect, but they're doing it with a controlled electrical sheet, not just a couple plates. Okay. Excitation causes shifts opposite to gravity. For instance, if atoms are excited, electrons are farther from nuclei and under less electric force. They're more loosely bound. Now incoming quanta of the same HV energy cause greater transmissions than before. Waves from the inside seem to be affecting only perception. Oh, it's only high in energy but low in energy for frequency to people outside. Sorry, so this is basically the combination of, oh, thank you very much, John Johnson. Jack Sarfati will never be half the man his mother was. Oh, wow, why do we have Jackson? We're going to Jack Sarfati chat. It's kind of crazy that people like Jack Sarfati never figured this out. Seems like a smart guy, but never figured out 0-point energy was the answer, huh? What uses are this? Ships can travel faster than the speed of light. Time may be accelerated by excitation 4 times. Then when we travel close to the speed of light, the ship simply regains the mass or time it originally had. But it is traveling 4 times faster than light when that happens. Thus, any star in this or any other galaxy are within reach without time dilation and with very little energy input. Remember, no supplemental energy is needed in the vacuum due to infinite collision time. Another way to view faster light travel is the people in the ship may simply accelerate to 200 meters per second in their seconds. Someone outside is 4 seconds. So that is time dilation, though. That's time dilation. Maybe the person saying that, maybe Marinov is saying that the person inside the craft would not be time dilated. You can't go to the past, so I'm not future Ashton. As far as I know, it's not possible. Okay, let's I want to see the faster than light communications. Suppose we emit 1 to 60 megacycle signal from a field where time is accelerated 1 million times. This is possible because energy required decays exponentially for faster times. The signal leaves and shifts down to 1 to 60 cycles. Anyone outside only sees the 60 cycle magnetic wave traveling at light. The information inside is compressed in time or bandwidth, but it does penetrate water and other matter very well. That would be like a gravity wave. The information inside is compressed into another antenna in the same 1 million field expands bandwidth or is quick enough to get the original information. This again shows the incontrovertibility of time and bandwidth. And EEG waves from 1 to 60 cycles contain more information than previously thought. The reason for faster than light propagation is the same as a stationary observer looking at light in a light clock on a relativistic ship. Light seems to be travel faster in this ship, and since Einstein took light speed to be a constant, he saw time must slow on the ship. But this gravity field makes light travel faster relative to the temporal state of the stationary observer. In our case, the signal travels millions of times faster than light, because gravity outside the ship is 1 million times greater. Huh. It's a pretty compelling argument for no time dilation and faster than light communication. Basically, if time stops at the speed of light, then the light that appears to be coming from super far away actually really isn't. It's coming from super close to us. Kind of weird. But it does fit in with the holographic principle. If everything's just an illusion, then distance shouldn't matter at all. This could also explain why the double slit experiment works for light that's coming from stars billions of light years away, because that's not how the light's working at all. The light is propagating through fields. So there's a little bit of light, like there's some light right in front of me, right? There's some light right here, and there's some light right here, and the light is propagating through the fields at me, which is what I believe is happening. I think that a lot of people think that as well, that the universe itself is dielectric. A negative resistor would be what the ether is, and that we're just pulling energy out of it. And that, to me, then the answer is not the Big Bang. To me, the answer to the redshift then is tired light. Is that light is losing energy. as it transmits through this medium. I'm a big fan of this. Field trip, Maldives, 5-star, all-inclusive. You just have to stay in a prison for the rest of your life. That's the only downside. Everything else is great. Aliens do exist, but the public is taken for granted. NASA's SETI is complete rubbish. Yep, cover up at its worst. They scan at 1 to 10 gigahertz. No alien transmissions occurs above 100 cycles, and NASA knows this. They're all compressed in time, like subspace communication on Star Trek. Nothing else has comparable efficiency. Light takes perhaps 15 minutes to reach another planet, but this is all instantaneous with compression. EEG wave telepathy is another cover-up. Okay, well, we're not going to get too much into the telepathy part, okay? But, and this is where you start to go off the rails with this. Like, dude, we don't need telepathy and communicating with the dead. Like, if that's going to be a thing, let's just stick with the faster than light communication. We're already freaking people out, right? We're freaking people out with the aliens existing, major conspiracies. We don't need EEG telepathy and talking to dead people and alien rape and all kinds of other weird shit that people push out there. Like, yeah, let's just, you know, the bad stuff will come too. Philadelphia experiment, blah, 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 flying saucers. The public has been misled. They have told you aliens are not visiting the Earth and do not exist. Rather than spacecraft, people are seeing the whole planet Venus fly across the sky. Okay. So I agree that we're probably going to see a bunch of civilizations the moment we start looking for high frequency gravitational waves. Because what we're looking for is these longitudinal waves through the ether, these compressions, and then they can be uncompressed. That's basically what he's saying here. It's interesting. I think it's pretty good. This is just like you can see at the top here. Like I think you guys can see the link. Scalarphysics.com resources. Stefan Marinov. I just want to see these other ones. I think one of these other ones was all about psychic abilities. This permeability and permittivity, the magnetic and electric, resistances basically, are directly proportionate to the distance of the electrons from the nuclei, thus allowing external magnetic and electric fields to more easily distort excited orbitals and store energy in the atom. Well, that's really interesting. If you don't know what that means, basically saying that we have these atoms and these electrons are spinning around them. Well, the changing the permittivity changes how easy it is to manipulate the orbital of the electron. And it's going to either lose energy or gain energy. If it loses its energy, then the universe is going to fill it back up. That's the balance that we're in. So even a lot of this, like Bob Greener talks about things being scale invariant. When Bob Greener mentions scale invariance, what he's saying is that these effects happen on any scale. It's just a matter of increasing the scale of your experiment. So for these cold fusion experiments, they can happen at big scales. They can happen at small scales as well. According to Maxwell's wave equation, speed of light is determined by 1 over the square root of the permeability times the permittivity of any spatial region. Yeah. So excitation must affect the speed of light just as relativistic gravity speeds light. This is an EM, electromagnetic refraction method. So this is where you're seeing like the quantum theorists have figured out that like this is just like our real world works like holography. And it's all about permeability and permittivity and changing the refractive index. And we can change our reality. Back to Schwinger limit. Schwinger limit's the secret to all of it. No wonder Jack was so upset by that. The Schwinger limit is just asking the question, okay, if we can bend space-time, how much do we bend it before it snaps? And the answer is something called the Schwinger limit. It's not as high as I would have thought. It's a big number, though. Okay, I think that's all we're going to look at on this one, although this is pretty interesting stuff. Let's see. More stuff about the Philadelphia experiment. Anyway, I think I got the main things here. So they're definitely people are asking the right questions here, right? They're asking the right questions in this scientific paper. Here's a relevant question. Genuinely curious, since the videos show an endothermic event, why do photons get released at all in the video? Wouldn't the photons be absorbed and no light emitted? Two ways to look at it. One, in Eric Davis's wormhole physics paper, he says that the mouth of the wormhole creates an umbra. When he's talking about umbra, it sounds like umbrella because it's literally bending the photons around that object, which could be why it's cold and black. Now, it may not even be black if we were to look at it with our eyes. We're just looking at it in a thermal video, so it's dark and it's cold. But the other thing is, why is there this flash? I don't know if I have the zap. I'm looking through my videos to see if I really need one that's just the zap. The satellite video. Yeah, I don't have just the zap. That's pretty whack. It's pretty whack, Arnold. But in this video, you can see this flash happen. And I thought, well, maybe the flash is an indication that it's fake. But actually, the flash is absolute proof that it's real. Why? Because this flash you see here is accurately illuminating the entire environment in 3 dimensions, including the clouds, which means those clouds are not a 2-dimensional picture of clouds. Those are 3-dimensional clouds. If this is fake, that means somebody meticulously rendered a 3-dimensional environment and used 2-dimensional pictures of clouds from some guy's trip to Japan on an obscure website to make these masterpieces. And that flash is actually not bending light, although technically it's probably bending around this zap. What's happening is something called the dynamic Casimir effect. When you break the Schwinger limit, go ahead and Google Schwinger effect right now. You're going to find that what happens is a release of photons from the ether. The dynamic Casimir effect actually pulls real photons from the ether. So for the moment that the zap happens, all the outside observer sees is a flash of light. And then the plane's just gone. Why? It's not because you can't see through the wormhole. It's because the flash of light blinds you. That's why you're seeing this flash of light. You're seeing a cold, dark absorption of energy, an endothermic event. And the flash of light is the dynamic Casimir effect, the Schwinger effect. Due to the Schwinger limit being reached, real photons are being pulled right out of the ether. Those virtual photons that are jumping into existence all the time, they're being pulled right out of the ether right there. This is 1,000% proof this video is real. Do you think that some hoaxer in 2014 understood the dynamic Casimir effect and the Schwinger effect? No. Hell, nobody had any clue that a wormhole would have photons radiating out from it, except for like Eric Davis. He's probably the only one on Earth. So now, for this video to be fake, somebody has to be a master physicist, a master hoaxer. They have to know about military footage, real enough to fool the experts. But then they also had to have guessed that this wormhole should be radiating light. They had to guess that somehow. Crazy. Guys, when I say I know these videos are real, like I mean that quite literally, but I don't need any more evidence to show people. There's already an overwhelming amount of evidence that the videos are real. Overwhelming amount. Scientific, evidence related to the plane disappearing, evidence of the videos themselves, like forensically. Like it's overwhelming. Those videos are real. It's just a matter of explaining what we see in a way that's palatable to people. Because I've also realized here, as we've been reading through this and as time has gone on, people are not going to be able to accept this for a long time. We're not looking at days or weeks or even months. We're looking at years, decades. This is so far beyond what anybody was ready for. well beyond the UFO community was ready for. The UFO community turns out mostly just a bunch of charlatans and scammers for the most part. There's a few legit people in there, but a lot of people are, and then from the community perspective, it's a lot of people with trauma. A lot of people that are dealing with their trauma and they're looking for validation. That's the truth. That's the UFO community. And then you got people out there scamming them, going, "Yep, the blue aliens that molested you, they're totally real. They're from the Andromeda galaxy, and pay me $50 an hour and I'll, soothe your feelings about it." Like, that's a lot of that shit happening. The real rub of the UFO phenomenon is not aliens. It's 0-point energy. It's free energy. That's where this whole thing goes back to every single time. So if you want to know if somebody's legit or not, in the UFO community, first thing I would say is, are they talking about 0-point energy? Are they talking about how free energy will change every aspect of our civilization? Because that's just going to change. That's going to change everything. Whatever we are right now, all of this is just a passing fad. The next stage of human evolution pushes all of this away. And the sooner we accept the science to be real, the sooner we go to that level. They're not going to admit the MH370 videos are right even after the science is proven to be real, because there's too much legal liability. Like, we just look at what we did on that plane. They're never going to admit that. That's like admitting that we killed JFK, which I think everybody accepts at this point, but they're never going to admit that. So yeah, get the word out. Get the word out. We're doing a good job. We're pressuring it. You don't want to be too pushy with it. We're not making a cult here like Flat Earth. This is not a cult that we're making. It's just science. Okay, so I think we're going to skip this. Okay, so the MAGLove device, we didn't even really get to look at the device itself, but if that's the write-ups related to the people connected to it, then I'm very interested in it. Very interested. Okay, one of the first ones that we're going to look at here is this is the vacuum triode power device. And we're not really going to look at it too much. We're just going to listen to Tom Beard and talk about it. Oh, wait, I have to switch sharing because this isn't going to work. We're going to basically do this until YouTube censors me. Let's see how long we go.
Step it down. The 120 volt power is being furnished to the 120 volt AC fan, and as you can see, the fan is blowing.
Okay, this is Floyd's suite, and this is his vacuum triode power generator. Tom Bearden seemed pretty convinced. He was there testing it seemingly for several days. Also looks like a hot summer day. I don't know why that's important. It just does.
Up a nice pleasant breeze here on this very warm evening. By the way, this is May the 16th, 1987, at the home of the inventor.
So just to give you guys some background, when people asked me, why are there no video? So like the goalposts always move. But if you guys are not familiar, like back when I first started talking about free energy, I said, well, why are there no videos of free energy if it's real? Next thing I realized is there's a shitload of videos of free energy online. A shitload of them. This is one of the earliest ones I was able to find. This is 1987.
Mr. Sparky Sweet.
Let's kick it up. So he's looking at it. It's neat. Where's the lights? Got some power generator things here.
Watt meter. Here's Sparky Sweet.
There we go.
And this is the incredible vacuum triode, which organizes and gates energy directly from the vacuum itself, producing usable, practical power.
So they really never changed anything, did they? You say, oh, I got to design a big transformer.
Okay, yeah, and I think part of the big issue with a lot of this is how do you do this without getting scammed? Or, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are scamming people, but there's also this element of like you have to know how the back-end engineering works. I think you can achieve free energy either through the device directly, connecting to the quantum gravity, to the ether, Also, I think you can just do it through amplification of energy. Like if you have a circuit running, I think with the right setup, you can use parametric oscillations to amplify energy, which is crazy because that means there's more than one way to pull it off. But either way, it can be pulled off. At a minimum, I think you can use... Oh, anyway, there we go. That's all I wanted to say on that part. Now, that part. This next one I have here actually is like the same link. Oh, this is the same link. It's actually exactly the same. Okay, I didn't care about that one then. Okay, so Tom Bearden also has his Meg video. I don't really want to watch the whole thing, but where's the Meg? Oh, I had actually better clips than that I should have just played. Let's watch this one.
Be built at our universities, in our national labs and everything, and then settle this argument once and for all. All you got to do is do state-of-the-art efficiency in the switching. Don't try to use too strong a current.
Oh, no, easily. I wanted. Oh, sorry, Chad. I don't have a very good system for naming my things here. Let's listen to Beard and talk about over unity instead.
Filed, my associates and I should say, have filed a very fundamental patent on the creation in a circuit of longitudinal waves to flow the energy freely, literally in the Tesla fashion, and then use it separately in a load to power a load. And technically, it's still called displacement current. What we have done, we have split the normal current, technically dq dt, into two components, one being displacement current, d phi dt, and one being that mass slippage every once in a while of these precessing electrons down the wire. And what we really have done is used a barrier invented by Bill Fogel to stop the mass flow, which is all the workflow, the rate at which energy is being lost in the circuit. We allow only the flow past Fogel's semiconductor, which is a patented device, patented in '92. And then we use this free energy flow, which just does not disperse. Conventional theory already recognizes displacement current as pure energy transport without losses. For example, the way to use it, and I want everybody to know so they can check it, if I then run the displacement current through the primary of its step-up transformer, I produce ordinary garden variety magnetic field and store that free energy in that magnetic field. That couples to the secondary, which then couples to the electrons in that circuit through the load, which are now free to move. I don't restrain them. And I pump the electrons through the load absolutely conventionally and do power in a load. So what I have is absolute conservation of energy, but I do not conserve work loss, the dissipation of the energy. I take the energy in almost freely from the battery or power source. In this case, it would be an oscillator because I'm speaking AC. We can do it DC. I strip off and block the component of the current that's responsible for all losses in the circuit. Then I take the displacement current and I couple it, gather it and store it in this case magnetic field, couple it to the other side and discharge it through the load completely separately. None of my load discharge current goes back through my source. No degradation is done to the source. And yes, indeed, you can legitimately do over unity electrical systems, and it's exactly analogous to a heat pump, which is a proven over unity system that we use in our homes. I just told the world how.
So that's really interesting. It's analogous to a heat pump, right? Is that we're just moving energy around. That's really what we're doing. And once you look at it from that perspective, you go, oh, we're doing it stupidly this whole time. What he's talking about there is he's talking about not letting your dipole collapse. And he's talking about engineering the back end in such a way where you prevent that from happening, where the dipole does not collapse. As long as you keep it open, you can engineer a system where you can keep that open, you're good to go. Pulses of current seem to be one way to pull these mechanisms off. We saw so with the oscillating parametric oscillations.
Adding our variable inductor into the circuit, the capacitor only needs a minuscule amount of latent charge, as even any dead capacitor will have some latent charge. The process of exponential growth begins, and after a short amount of time, the current begins to take off. And since the current must be constant through all the elements, we see that the voltage across the resistor takes off as well. This means that real power is being generated in the system, and is able to do real work, creating heat through the resistor. Starting with a resistance above 165 ohms, we can see that the oscillation exponentially decays as more energy is lost than gained per cycle. As we drop the resistance below 165 ohms, the oscillation grows exponentially as more energy is gained than is lost per cycle.
And there's the
hone
magic.
in on 165 ohms.
Oh, okay, well, whatever. There's the magic. We don't need that guy to talk anymore. Right there. That to me says you can amplify energy from a dead battery and you can have it just produce free energy. So there's obviously more than one way to pull it off. You can either increase your tap directly and your engineering directly to the 0-point energy field, or the other way is you can manipulate any electrical field that's already pulling energy out and you can amplify it. That's pretty profound if you think about it, guys. That's pretty profound. And why are people ignoring this? Because it goes against how they were taught. It's really as simple as once you understand 0-point energy is out there, all these concepts make perfect sense. You're like, oh, okay, of course we can amplify the energy from an existing current. Of course we can manipulate and engineer our connection to the 0-point energy to be more efficient. It's really what it's all about. Somebody asked me just a second ago about, yeah, wow is correct. So now, and just like, you know, why am I not shocked talking about this? Well, I've already had so many Yahtzee moments on the science that it's just numb to me now at this point. There's been so many times where we go, wow, like this science is real. We can actually do all this stuff. How is the public just not caught on to this? In some ways, it's because the electrical engineering and the physics side aren't meshed together like they need to be. You got the electrical engineers over here and you got the physics people over here. The physics people are saying that's not possible. The electrical engineering people are saying, yeah, well, we figured out dynamic Casimir effect and we're pulling photons directly out of the ether. Here's the dynamic Casimir effect paper for the person who was asking. We went over this on Wednesday if you want to check it out, but right here at the bottom, in addition to observing the creation of real photons, we detect two-mode squeezing in the emitted radiation, which is a signature of the quantum character of the generation process. They're literally pulling real photons out of the ether. This is 2011. 2011. So relatively new, but still not that new. Okay. So we've realized that we can amplify energy. There's energy out there. We can produce a circuit that produces free energy. We can tap into the energy directly. Everything that we've basically been lied to that they've claimed that we can't do, that it's all possible. It's all possible. Now, this paper here is Tom Beard. And again, I'm not going to reread it because I talked about this on Wednesday, but he basically talks about coefficient of performance greater than 1 is possible. It's not possible under our old paradigm of thinking. But when you take into account this 0-point energy that's out there, now coefficient of performance greater than 1 in a system is absolutely possible. Absolutely. And yeah, superconductivity and superfluidity are quantum effects at the macroscopic level. So we're already producing stuff that's quantum in nature at the macroscopic level. And it's just going to get crazier. It's going to get crazier. There's another paper with almost the exact same name that was written for the DIRDs, the Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, by Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis. Almost identical. This one's called On Extracting Electromagnetic Energy from the Vacuum, and the other one's called Concepts for Extracting Energy from the Quantum Vacuum. Pretty much identical, guys. So we talk about Floyd Sweet, Bearden and Cyril are also two other guys that I think were quite legit. We're going to probably watch a little bit of Bendini's stuff a little bit at the end, But John Cyril, I think I have the cooling effect that I can show you guys. Now, we're not going to watch this whole thing, and I'm going to mute it. But if I skip halfway, you can start to see there's major cooling effect that's happening here as well. Everything that you've seen in Star Trek becomes possible. Everything you've seen in Star Trek. Reverse aging is also possible. The medical aspects are probably some of the scariest in terms of what the implications are of 0 point energy. There you go. Yeah, this video right here is pretty money, honestly. This video is a video that I could see getting banned off the internet because, like, they're not faking this. You're just seeing these massive cooling areas. And this is so important because compared to the drone video, now we see why are they looking at it with a drone video and thermal? Partially because it's nighttime, but also partially because they wanted to show us the cooling effect. Because the easiest way to show somebody that negative energy is real is you just show them the MH370 drone video with the negative energies app. Now they're like, oh, okay, negative energy is real. Like the moment the MH370 videos are accepted to be real, all of physics is going to say, oh, okay, we get it now. It's all based on 0 point energy. Always was. Yeah, we could live forever, possibly. So the John Cyril device, I think, is probably legit. To me, the biggest question is just how efficient is it? I don't want something with a bunch of scary moving parts. Honestly, to me, no moving parts is the move. Right at the end here, it's so cold that he pulls frost off the middle here. There's frost on the middle. So why is there a cooling effect? Because you're pulling 0 point energy directly out of the ether. The fact that there's this frost on the magnet thing in the middle here is pretty significant to me. Like, this is stuff that, like, how does conventional physics explain this? I thought you told me it's all about entropy. It's all about entropy, then my thing shouldn't be cooling down when it spins at 5,000 rotations a minute or whatever it's doing. It should be getting hotter and hotter and hotter, not colder and colder and colder. Something's obviously missing. We'll come back to Bendini. So I think Bendini is probably also legit. So we've already got Floyd Sweet, most likely. Tom Bearden was definitely legit. John Cyril and John Bendini. John Hutchinson, I can't say. I've never seen John Hutchinson's stuff, but I've heard legit things about him. I'm not going to look at Stanley Meyer's thing, but the hydrogen-powered car and water-powered car, I think also was probably legit. I think Stanley Meyer was way better than what people on the outside thought of him as a crank or whatever. I think he was probably totally legit. And yes, Holcomb we're going to look at next. So that's already giving you like 5 that I think are legit people. Now we're going to look at the Holcomb device, which is one of my favorites out there. I'm fairly certain. And again, like I can't know 100% that these devices are all legit or whatnot. But I take into account like the attacks against certain people and what have you. And, you know, whether or not they've been sued, things like that when I'm making my personal judgments here. And in this case, where is it? Even though these people have been sued, like I have not seen anything that's like really sticking in terms of like that it would damage the credibility of their products. Here it is, way down here. Okay, Holcomb Energy System.
The pressure is
Oh, wait. This is the guy that didn't understand how it worked. Okay. You know what? I'll just... Oh, here it is.
Fuel source is the material from which it is made, electrical steel. And no, it never runs out. It's the natural energy force of the universe, just like the energy that keeps the stellar bodies of the universe in motion never runs out. Let me explain. Let's take a look inside the generator rotor pole to see where the energy that fuels the Holcomb energy system actually comes from. Here are the rotor coils which generate the spinning magnetic fields. These magnetic fields in turn generate the power in the stator coils. Now let's look around. The electrical steel from which these poles are made consists primarily of iron atoms. The atoms form molecules, and these molecules make up the electrical steel. The iron atoms contain a nucleus made of protons and neutrons. A cloud of electrons swarm around the nucleus. Now, the majority of electrons are made up of what we call paired electrons. These paired electrons do not form magnetic poles, but the remaining 4 electrons are unpaired. The unpaired electrons spin in independent orbitals, which generate magnetic poles, both north and south pole. Let's look at a simplified example of how an electron rotating around the nucleus of the atom creates polar magnetic fields.
I want to point out right here that what we're seeing here, the only way for this to be stable if it's at its ground state is if it's in a balance, in equilibrium as well.
The paired electrons together cancel their magnetic poles. However, the unpaired electrons do create magnetic poles, which makes these iron atoms magnetic. Here are images from an exciting study published in the summer of 2019 in the journal Nature Physics. The authors were able to image the magnetic cloud generated by unpaired electrons in an atom of metal. A group of atoms in the metal will become magnetically aligned. However, the various groups will be misaligned. These misaligned groups are called magnetic domains. Domains may be magnetically aligned by a weak electromagnetic field, but when the domains become aligned, the resulting magnetic fields become 4 to 5 times stronger than the fields required to align the domain. Using this principle, the unique design of the Holcomb energy system harnesses and magnifies the electrical energy input by 400 to 500%.
Okay, so basically a solid state device that's manipulating the 0 point electrical nature of the 0 point energy all around us, which I think is very smart. I don't really understand the 4 to 5 times bonus thing. Seems kind of gimmicky and kind of marketing. I'm not sure that's really 4 to 5 times the energy gain. Somebody asked, when can I get my hands on one of these devices? To be perfectly honest with you, it seems like most of these devices, they're trying to increase the coefficient of performance. Because even at the levels they're at right now, the energy is free to pull out, but the devices are extremely expensive, so you're not really getting your money back. Or you are, but you're not, like, you're also taking some risks when you're taking one of these devices as well. So it's not really a situation of when can I get my hands on it. It's more of like a situation of when are they going to make it commercialized to the point where it's available to the public. Like that's really it. It's a matter of commercialization of the product. What's the product going to look like that's going to be the one that random Joe Schmoes on the street can buy? I think we're getting there, though. I think we're very close. Okay, so the next one is, so Holcomb generator, I'm a fan of. I think that he's going to win the lawsuit easily. He's already had dismissed 4 lawsuits from the same person. So I think that that won't be a problem. Now, this one is the Liberty engine. Okay, so Liberty engine, if you don't remember, that's this device here, Liberty engine. Liberty engine, I asked some people as well. I was interested, why are they wearing gloves and black shirts and stuff like this? Because these people, I think they stole some information, probably from a defense contractor or energy company, and they don't want to get killed, most likely. And they're showing people that free energy is possible. Magnetic motors are possible because of the same concepts that Holcomb just talked about. When you realize that there's a 0 point energy field, you realize that we can polarize a region of it. Like when we go back to our paint, we can cross out, we can crop a circle of it. And then the question is, well, if all this energy is being radiated outward, how do we capture that energy? How do we capture it? Because really, we're pulling more energy out than we're actually able to use. We're only able to capture a small percentage of it. That's what's really happening. The rest of this energy is being lost out there. It's relatively easy to make a closed system that will then continually produce energy. And that's what I think this Liberty engine has done. I've seen enough demonstrations online where it's possible to fake. Anything's possible to fake, but this is a lot of work to go in to try to convince people that free energy is fake. You're making real electric devices here, right? So let's go to so they take it all apart here. They test it out with the meters right here as well. I mean, he's got 2 different camera angles where you're seeing it here. All at 0, right? It's not running, no voltage. So this tells you there's no secret battery connected to it. If there's a battery connected to it there, we would see a voltage show up while it's not moving. And this is a full unedited video here, by the way, guys. So he takes the wire, he spins it up, it just takes a little bit to keep going, and then the magnet's picking it up back. They've built in some kind of asymmetry. How do I mute this? They've built in some kind of asymmetry into the stator or something that's going on with the spinning wheel here, where it's not quite off the shelf, which is why people try to make this with an epoxy, and it's not going to work. If you are making an epoxy stator here, which is the cylindrical device in the middle, then you've clearly not understood anything about any of this. Like, if you don't understand the right-hand rule in electrical engineering, then you're never going to understand free energy. Simple as that. So let's see. My favorite one, though, is the video that they did when they're out in the forest. So they plug it in here. Okay, we can see we're set to 0. I'm pretty sure this is no edits here as well. So if they somehow pulled a trick off, it's impressive. It's funny what people will convince themselves of just to deny what they see with their eyes as well. A lot of people, they see this and they just think they must be pulling a trick off. But you say, well, what if it's just real? What if they're just showing you it's really real? 228 volts. It's producing real work. $228 volts. Okay. Then let's go show the other video. Here's the outdoors video. This is them on the side of the road, middle of nowhere. I'm gonna skip through some of this, but they've got like they've got a water pump, they've got a computer, they've got power tools, and they're running it off the motor here. People are like, oh, they buried the power lines underneath the ground by this pond on the side of the road. Like later on in this, they show you that they're on the side of the road here at the end, I think. Yeah, like here we go. We're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no power. Like, where do they think they pulled the power from? Even if they buried lines in the ground, like where? Out in the forest? Where do you think there's no power lines? There's nowhere to pull power from. They buried a power cord 10 miles. Like, I don't know. There you go. It's a matter of how do you commercialize it? How much are people willing to pay? So, when I was promoting the EtherTech over Unity device, a lot of the responses that I got from people were, oh, I would pay $500. I would pay $1,000 for that. That's where a lot of people's mindsets were at. We're like, for a free energy device, $1,000. If we could produce it for $1,000, I would be a billionaire. I would be a billionaire. I would be Elon Musk. But of course not. The cost of a device like this is a huge amount of skilled labor, aka somebody is painstakingly spending hours building that. In the West, in America, skilled labor is extremely expensive, especially engineering, $100 to $200 an hour. Now, if it takes 100 hours to build that, now you're $10,000 to $20,000 deep just in technical engineering. So unless you're spending your time and you don't value your time, the cost to produce a device like this is extremely expensive. It's a lot. How do you get it to, then you say, okay, well, mass produce it. Figure out how to mass produce it. Those are the people that are getting disappeared by the government. The moment you're making a mass production of a free energy device, that's when you're going to get your yacht hit by a tornado, right? Somebody like me just talking about it is one thing. But if you are start trying to mass produce it to a scale where it's not going to be able to be suppressed, you're going to get disappeared. You're going to get disappeared. And if you are interested in investing, first of all, you must not care about your life expectancy because you're going to chop your life expectancy down significantly. But also, if you are, then pay close attention to the devices that we're looking at. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be a gold rush. Now, the Liberty Engine device, the one we were just looking at right there, that one, the issue is they stole some intellectual property that's either industry secret or something where they're going to get sued if they were to try to sell that device. But they've shown you the way. Magnetic motors are 100% possible.
It's important to understand that any magnetic motor or so forth, there is a very deep connection between magnetism and zero-point energy. So, yeah, go ahead and build a magnetic motor. It's possible to draw this energy just using spins of electrons and permanent magnets.
So that's Dr. Thorsten Ludwig, who's an expert of zero-point energy and the history around it, says that, yes, this zero-point energy means that electric motors are absolutely possible because it's all about the spin of the electrons. And what is a magnet? A magnet is just aligned spins of electrons, just like what Holcomb was just talking about in our previous video. So, of course, magnetic motors are possible. I would even argue the magnetic motor is like the ancient version of this. Like once you've figured out nanotechnology and microchips, we don't need magnetic motors anymore. Now we can have solid state devices that are doing the same thing at a much more efficient level. Much more efficient. Magnetic motors, how we pull it off like we are like cave people. Or we're like the people that built the pyramids. Oh, we think we're so advanced. We figured out a magnetic motor. We figured out that there's free energy all around us. Like, okay, yay. So proud for you. Pat on the head. Well, we've got a microchip that can go in my phone, that can run my phone forever. Like, you know, that's where we're really at. Right now, we're at the part where we're building microchips that are free energy devices. Okay, so that was Thorsten Ludwig. I love the Thorsten Ludwig video, guys. If you're interested, check out, I think it was a Secret Science Wednesday where we watched that full video of Thorsten Ludwig. If you have not caught up on the history of zero-point energy, please do. It doesn't take more than 30 minutes to an hour to understand all the main arguments that show that zero-point energy is undeniably real. Very important. So, the same way where I live in Minnesota, it's not a secret anymore. I've been doxxed enough times. And medical marijuana is just becoming legal in Minnesota, and they're going to do some kind of lottery or something for getting a license to be able to sell marijuana, or not medical, but recreational. That's going to be the same thing that's going to be happening with zero-point energy. The moment zero-point energy is allowed to be real by the government, they're going to give away licenses to people. They're going to say, you have to show me that your company is legit. And if you are, we're going to do a lottery and an X number of people get licenses to do free energy. They're not going to let everybody do it. If you think that, then you don't know much about capitalism. So you want to be somebody who's on the ground floor, who understands that the technology is real, so that the moment that that veil gets lifted and everybody's in the stupor going, wait, free energy is real? Wait, what? Zero-point energy? Like, we could just be like totally extracting the energy all around us and we don't need solar? But I was just clapping for the rocket that we sent into the sky. When everybody is doing that, you can be jumping in there getting on board with the next industry. If you want an industry to be involved in, anything related to 0 point energy is going to take over everything else. Either as an employee, as an investor, as any of those things. That's the next $1 billion, $1 trillion idea. 0 point energy. Cold fusion or whatever, right? So that gets us to our next thing, cold fusion. So let's start with this one. So Ken Shoulders, if you watched on Wednesday, we talked all about Ken Shoulders and exotic vacuum objects. These are showing weird charge clusters that are natural asymmetries in plasma. Ken Shoulders had figured this out. And Ken Shoulders gets referenced in this paper, Concepts for Extracting Energy from the Quantum Vacuum, which is one of the DIRDs. This one was written by Pudoff and Davis, and it's basically a copy of the name that Tom Bearden called his paper. I'm not going to read this whole thing. We read it on Wednesday. But this is important because they say, like, they do 3 pages of this, explain these exotic vacuum objects and how they're pulling energy from the vacuum. And it showed here that even though they're easily produced, efforts to test the hypothesis have not been met with success due to technical problems. This topic is ideal to pursue for future research. So this idea of these quantum vacuum objects is like the number one way to produce free energy, and it's cold fusion. Instead of hot fusion, instead of stupidly trying to cause elements to fuse, we create a natural anti-gravity effect, and we just manipulate that to produce infinite energy. Infinite energy. The problem isn't just that people want to be rich, but it's certainly a problem. Absolutely. A lot of people want to be rich, and they underestimate the levels of suppression. They underestimate them. The people that have been hiding this are very good at hiding it. Very good, and they barely have to try. They're like the Harlem Globetrotters, and then some noob comes onto the street thinking, oh, I just figured out free energy, without looking at the history of it. And they're seeing dollar signs. And next thing you know, they've either gotten paid off and their thing is gone, or they've been killed, or whatever. But we're getting to the part where it's too difficult to hide now. We're getting to the part where we're seeing it too clearly. The picture is too clearly painted for us. And yes, you saw my permanent ban message there as well. That proves that I have, in fact, been banned from Reddit permanently for saying that some Redditors that were, I did not even name people directly, Redditors in general, were mentally ill. I have no complaints, no regrets, chat. No regrets. Okay, only 2 more videos. This next one is, maybe I have a clip I can play instead of this. Hold on. Yeah, I do. Okay, so NG8. So the NG8 cold fusion slowly device. Working to improve. So this device appears to be one of the first legitimate cold fusion. I mean, I shouldn't say first, because we've had cold fusion known since 1989 at least. But recently, one of the better fusion experiments. Now, what I want to tell you guys is that cold fusion got rebranded into low energy nuclear reactions, LENR. Watch Bob Grenier. He's one of the top experts in the world on cold fusion. Bob Grenier is, which I didn't even know that when I first met him. Now it's been rebranded into catalyzed fusion. Catalyzed fusion should bring up a lot of questions too. What's the catalyst? Air? Water? So basically, it's an engine that just runs on air and water. That sounds like free energy to me. We got a lot of air and water around here, you know? So catalyzed fusion is the new term, but it all means cold fusion. And I can see what's going to end up happening too is that we're going to get to a part where we pretend like this is all new. There's going to be this part happening where we've just discovered cold fusion, everybody, but we're not going to call it cold fusion. They're going to call it catalyzed fusion, where we've discovered the secret to quantum gravities. And you're going to go, okay, so it was just 0 point energy all along? Always was. Right? Like, and that's what's going to happen too, by the way. And people are going to pat themselves on the back and they're going to go, we figured out a unifying theory, but we're not going to say that it explains dark energy and dark matter because we don't like that. Like, it's going to get clown shoes. If you think we're clown shoes now with the physics and academic community, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And we need to be pushing back. Like, you need to be pushing back against every single influencer and physicist. If you see them in interviews, in the comments, I want to see you guys in the comments everywhere out there. What do you think about 0 point energy? What do you think about the Casimir effect, being able to offset the Coulomb repulsion? What do you think about exotic vacuum objects and Ken Shoulders' work? What do you think about the idea of using 0 point energy as a free energy device? Those are the questions I want to see getting spammed to every physicist, every engineer, and all their YouTube comments, all that stuff. Just make their lives a living hell until they address this science.
Performance, to improve coefficient of performance, which is a ratio of output energy to input energy.
So right there, they gave away the secret. So why are these guys not worldwide yet? Because a lot of the excess energy is coming in the form of heat, and they can't efficiently convert it into electricity. That's a real problem. So when you talk about these free energy devices, you realize they're not all rainbows and unicorns. There's some real problems with them. And even if you have it, then how are you hooking it up to your grid is another question. So there's a lot of real challenges that you have to face. They may seem trivial, but they're real. So what they're doing is they're trying to improve coefficient of performance. Also, they want to get the energy out in the form of electricity, electrical energy, because that's the form that we use. So if it's all coming out in heat, it's not that great. But as we saw from Ken Shoulders' work and from Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff's paper, these spheres of energy seem like the ideal situation for pulling electrical energy out of the vacuum.
So what we will be demonstrating today is increased coefficient of performance against last testing we have done.
I spent all my life in nuclear energy research. After 20 years, I wanted to find a much better solution than high power density nuclear power stations, which cost a nation. It may wreck a nation. It is so expensive.
As a chief technology officer, I'm responsible for all of the technical parts here. And as such, I'm observing the validation and also check that everything goes right, because validation for us is extremely important.
We've got a Hungarian laboratory now, so it's great to have some of the Hungarian team here.
As a nuclear engineer, I was always interested in the best possible solution which we should give to the public.
I'm an independent scientist, but also I'm an administrator on NANO Forum, which is probably the world's #1 site now for people who are interested in low-energy nuclear reactions.
So, I mean, right there's the money shot. There's the plasma right there. You're staring at it. That's it. And when you look at these guys, these are real engineers and physicists. These aren't just dudes right off the street. You know, these are legit guys. That plasma right there, that's the secret. That's the rub. Now, this is more like a pilot light. You know, this is like something you would have in your water heater. But this same effect can be scaled up. And if it produces a magnetic monopole, now you've got a device that just floats freely. That's amazing, though. That's amazing, guys.
It's a very interesting device, and it's based on the idea of plasmoid science, also known as EVOs.
It's based on plasma science, plasmoid science, also known as EVOs. Direct reference, exotic vacuum objects, right there. You just heard it. EVOs. So the thing that we've got to get across to people is plasma has these self-organizing properties, natural asymmetry. Natural asymmetry, when I say that, what does that mean to the layman out there? The answer is it's a battery. It's a battery that's an infinite battery. Plasma has the self-organizing properties, and the plasma is an infinite battery. It's the Energizer Bunny. It never runs out. Just the natural asymmetry of plasma, it reaches a weird equilibrium where now that you have this fusion happening, but it's also self-sufficient. Also self-sufficient. Can also explain why stars exist for billions of years. We don't need there to be a huge amount of mass in there. We can, if it's using negative energy, that can help explain why these stars are able to exist for billions and billions of years. In fact, they might last a lot longer than we imagine.
Which has a pedigree dating.
I'll actually replay that last few seconds.
A very interesting device, and it's based on the idea of plasmoid science, also known as EVOs, which has a pedigree dating right back to the 1950s, when an American who had worked on the Manhattan Project started to look at what he called condensed plasmoids, which are toroidal structures composed almost entirely of electrons.
They are compact charges containing millions of electrons.
Possibly as high, it was postulated, as Avogadro's number, which is 10 to the 27 electrons.
Fact check, false. It's like 10 to the 23, not 10 to the 27 or 10 to the 25. Anyway, what that guy said was wrong, but whatever.
10 followed by
a lot.
27 zeros. So you can see that's a large, complex structure.
Their effects in order to catalyze fusion were discovered well before the
catalyzed fusion, chat. So part of the reason why this is so goddamn annoying is to untangle this web of the science is that these people have been using like 5 different terms to all mean the same thing. People use these terms to all mean the same thing, but if you're a random person out there, you can't keep all this stuff straight. Like, I need one common way to refer to everything. It's the ether, okay? It's the ether. It's not the Dirac sea, the zero-point energy field, the fluctuations, the quantum foam. It's just the ether, man. It's the ether. It's cold fusion. It's UFOs. What was old is new again. We're going to call it whatever we want to call it. You know, I'm going to say that one more time. UFOs, cold fusion, ether, it's all coming back. Screw your catalyzed fusion, your quantum foams, all this stuff. We're going with the oldies. No UAPs or even USOs. It's all just UFOs, man.
First World War, there was no clue how to generate them. And this is what we did with my colleagues. We put together the pieces of the puzzles, and provided we got enough funding, we shall be able to drive with extremely cheap electricity the whole world.
We calculate the Q value based on the output to input ratio.
A couple of weeks ago, we were looking at the result of a reaction, which is transmutation of elements.
What we're trying to do is to create a metal matrix where the hydrogen can be going and other ions can be forming.
So they're working on transmutation as well, because again, when you see the real deal, you know what it's going to do. It's going to transmute elements. That's what fusion does. And we have a release of energy. We're seeing photons come out as well. So that's another thing that we're commonly seeing. That's why we're seeing light emitted by this plasma as well. We're seeing photons getting pulled right out of the ether. Yeah, Q value is coefficient of performance, by the way, guys. If you don't know what Q value is at the end, again, they use these same terms, mean the same stuff. Professor Vladimir Marinov, who is connected to that, one of the scientists, he has a super unification theory that he published. JK Philly fan read it. I read like half of it. It's all about 0-point energy. And it might be slightly different than the view of Puthoff and those guys, but it's all the basic same idea, same physics, which just lends more weight to the argument of like, I was listening to the Leonard Susskind, Kurt Jamungal interview, and they're talking about there's 500 different theories of how the answer works. And it's like, not really. There's one that sticks out above all the others, which is 0-point energy. That theory explains everything. That one explains everything. Every aspect of physics, that we don't understand, dark energy, negative energy, mass, gravity, inertia, everything. Explains it all. I don't know why we're not just going with the one that explains everything. And then we can argue about the little edges in terms of which sub-idea makes the most sense. Like, we're getting stuck in this perfect solution fallacy where we think that whatever the next solution is, it has to explain everything. And everything, if one little piece is not understood, then it's all useless. It's like, come on, man. So let's end with Bendini. We're going to look at Bendini here a little bit. Energy from the Vacuum, number 6. This series, highly recommended. Tom Bearden stuff in here, John Bendini, a lot of really good videos to watch. This is part 6. There's like 40 parts to this.
What is radiant energy? If you're talking about radiant energy, to me, what do I consider radiant? Okay, what I consider radiant is the capturing of a spike. I consider that radiant. You know, anything that, say, I generate the radiant energy. I do that by my coils, my switching circuits. That's how I generate radiant energy. In other words, what I'm saying is that I'm only concerned with a sharp transient in the spike as far as the radiant goes. You know, as far as negative energy goes, the negative energy comes from the battery. Once I generate this sharp transient and charge the battery, it's a negative effect to the battery because there's no heating of the battery with the radiant charger. So basically, the thing is to build circuits that generate these sharp transients and then steal that sharp transient and put that to the battery. That way I don't need much current at all to do it. Next question.
So right off the bat, I can tell that John Bendini understood the idea of negative energy, and he understood the idea of having your dipole collapse. So you imagine every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So what does that mean in our circuit then? If we have a circuit filled with energy, if we're using some energy to do work, then there's going to be an opposite reaction as well. So the battery is getting killed by itself, by its own fact that it's doing its work. That's a conceptual understanding. Now, it seems like what Bendini is saying here is he's figured out a way to prevent that from happening. And you just engineer your circuit using Tesla's designs to potentially get around that problem.
Can you talk a bit about the radiant spikes that we saw on the screen for the pendulum oscillator?
The radiant spike, the pendulum's a totally different machine. You know, and it's like one transient spike at a time. You know, it's still the same principle. It's still each time that the pendulum goes up or the pendulum goes down.
So oscillations is very, very important when it comes to quantum mechanics. When it comes to quantum mechanics, oscillations is everything. Somebody mentioned the Zitterbuergong. Zitterbuergong is the oscillation happening at the small scale. Imagine that we're in this ocean, and this ocean's vibrating at these tiny scales. Nothing's ever really stopped. That's what we're seeing all around us. So oscillation becomes important even on large scales, because remember, scale invariance. The size is not important. The size can be scaled up or down. The effect are still the same regardless. We still follow the same equations. So what Bendini is figuring out here is that even on the small scales, we can interact with this energy that's out there that's oscillating. And this is why I bring up the scenario, and I brought it up on Candace Owens, the idea of pushing the swing. Instead of just constantly pushing the swing up and down, let's just push like when it comes back at its height. This is actually an analogy that fits with what we're trying to do from the electrical engineering perspective. From the electrical engineering perspective, we want to push at the right time. Oscillations are very important. People think that oscillation is like, at least I used to think that oscillation, I should speak for myself, that oscillation was this woo-woo concept. But no, actually, oscillation is extremely important because everything is waves. And everything is based on frequencies and oscillations, even at the smallest scales.
And we just transfer that energy from one, right, it's a balancing act between, the pendulum movement. And so one battery being lower than the other battery, it balances between the two batteries. And it's still the same wave, except that the wave it's much longer in time.
What happens if you try to swap the primary battery with a secondary battery that's being charged with a radiant?
No, you can't mix the two sources. One electricity is completely different than the next. One, you're asking, you're putting in a positive form of energy, right? And you're asking for a negative form out, which is the radiant. And so therefore you can't just swap the batteries without a time period between them. And you just can't take the back battery and put it on the front battery because it's just going to kill itself if you do.
So the way I think he's describing it is that if you pull positive energy, you're pulling out pairs of energy. Positive and negative are both coming with one another when you're pulling it out. You're going to send the positive energy one way to one battery and the negative energy to one way to another battery. Keep them separate. We're keeping equivalence. We're keeping conservation because we're pulling out the equivalent amount of positive and negative. But we're using half of it to charge our negative battery with a negative charge and then our positive battery with positive charge. And we can't mix them because that's the whole point. If we mix them, then we've equalized again. We've broken down our dipole again. That seems to be what he's explaining here. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone in the chat.
Do that. However, you can put as many batteries as you want on the back. Now you can move that to something else. You take the battery that you charge and run an inverter, and then you could run the inverter and charge the front battery. So you have to change the forms of energy because they're both different forms.
So that would apply to every one of your devices?
Every one of my devices.
So to me, Bendini was an expert of the engineering on the back end. This isn't even about magnetic motors. He's talking about like, how do I just rig an electrical circuit to produce free energy for me? Which parametric oscillations, we looked at that video. And then how do I design a series of batteries within a circuit to separate out, let's call it the good energy with the bad, although it's not really a good way to frame it. But to basically reroute the energy that would collapse the dipole into a separate capacitor. Pretty interesting. Let's do like one more minute of his.
In a normal circuit, when you increase the load, the current increases. What goes on in your circuits?
You're talking about Lenz's law. You're talking about the back EMF interfering with the work of the motor. It's free in the monopole system. We don't even have a Lenz's law. We have no counter back EMF to slow down the motor under load. So if we slow down the motor, we can't draw more current. We never, the current is just going to go down. Motor's going to go slower, same pulse, same spike's going to appear, same radiant. But we're not faced with a Lenz's law problem, of counter electromagnetic force.
Is the pendulum system a closed loop system?
No, they were two separate loops. There were two separate loops, one being closed at the back and one being closed at the front. But the two loops are not tied together, and it's out of phase from each other. So when the front's doing something, the back isn't receiving a signal at all. It's not until the pendulum swings the other direction.
So you had so when the pendulum comes down, the trigger pulse comes in.
Well, no, it comes in after. You got to charge the iron in the pendulum, and then the trigger pulse takes place later.
Yeah, so it's definitely dealing with it. It's going a little bit over my head just because I'm not an expert in electrical engineering, which goes to show it's not easy to figure this stuff out, but it does look like to be some type of switching system and multiple batteries is what he's explaining there, and trying to separate out the positive current flow from the negative current that would collapse it. Pretty interesting. So yeah, I think that Bendini was legit. If I look and I listen to that, I think that he definitely understood the concepts. And for the people who say, well, is that producing a powerful electromagnetic field? If we were pulling a lot of energy, absolutely. Absolutely, it's going to. I would not want to be standing near the zap in the MH370 videos, nowhere near it. The amount of electromagnetic force being created there is huge. So, but for the power levels that we're talking about in a small device, pretty much negligible, even though it seems like it's a lot for the tiny amount that we pull out. What we're pulling out is insignificant. To like light these lights, this is like essentially nothing. You know, when you scale it up, that's when you start to get to the scarier parts about it. You don't want to be next to it. So you don't want to be near any Philadelphia experiments. You don't want to be on the edge of it for sure, but I would say far away, guys. Okay, so free energy is possible. We learned 0-point energy is the answer to how we can produce free energy. We learned that free energy is not fundamentally free from an economic perspective. It's just an unlimited supply. So the price will go down over time as our material science picks up. Magnetic motors are possible. Solid state devices are possible. Microchips can produce free energy. And we've learned that plasmas, exotic vacuum objects, and cold fusion, which is exotic vacuum objects, are possible, and all of these are all sources of overunity, of coefficient of performance greater than 1, of free energy. We've also learned that not only can you design a device that can produce free energy, you can manipulate the circuitry and design of your circuit to potentially amplify energy from an almost nothing state to a state where you have a huge amount of energy flowing out. That thought alone is paradigm shifting. Take a basically empty capacitor, but the fact that it's never really empty means we can then oscillate the current, oscillate our RLC circuit to a point where the energy gets amplified exponentially. Scary stuff. Do with this information what you will, guys. I hope you guys are there to take advantage of this as it comes out. I don't know what comes next. Next week, probably what we're going to do is do a recap of the MH370 case going back a year in terms of, I want to show people what it looked like at the beginning of the case, the middle of the case, and then the back half of the case. I think that's probably what we're going to talk about next week in a 3-part series. And then after that, we'll see. I don't really know what we're going to do. So thank you, MH370X. Love you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed Free Energy Friday. Have a great night, guys. We'll talk soon. Bernie, nice to see you in the chat, brother. Peace out, everybody.
In the fields where the skies are wide, talking about a journey through the cosmic ride. Einstein and Thorne, they set the stage for a trip through time across the space age. Wormholes connect distant points in space, traversable paths to a far-off place. No black holes pull, no crushing weight, just a cosmic tunnel to a distant gate.
Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow.
Exotic matter, negative energy's the key to stabilize the wormhole for you and me. Quantum vacuum squeeze so tight, creating conditions for this wondrous flight. Static fields and lasers in the lab they play, generating forces in a new kind of way. Gravitational squeezing, Casimir's force, negative zones we need to stay the course.
Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow.
Thin shell formalism plates so fine, spherical geometry we realign, energy conditions that we must defy. For a stable wormhole, let's give it a try. Forces balancing the plate, creating the throat, open the gates, from Earth to the stars in a single bound, a shortcut through space profound. Engineers and dreamers hold the key to future worlds and what we could be. With science in hand, we forge ahead through the cosmic paths that we now tread. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow. From the fields to the stars, we break the chains. Understanding the universe, we make the gains. Lil Hula Crunk shines, bringing truth to light. Through his music, we'll explore the night. With wormholes and stargates, our path is clear.